Di depan aja Mas. Good morning, everyone. How are you guys today? Good? This is quite a gloomy morning, right?
Yes.
But we are happy today to welcome our special guest from Wageningen University and Research, Dr. Maya Slingerland. Today we will listen, learn, and see the explanations about oil palm specifically, and then I think we will learn a lot from Dr. Maya. So before the guest lecture start, allow me to read her CV, because she has extensive research on oil palm in Indonesia. Indonesia is one of the countries, so there's a lot of countries. So let's see. Dr. Maya Slingerland is associate professor in Plant Production System Group in Wageningen University in the Netherlands. She acquired her master's degree in animal science in 1989 and her PhD in mixed crop livestock system in 2000. And she has about 30 years of experience in smallholder farming research. So this is quite extensive, 30 years. And for at least 15 years, she conducted research on best management practices in oil palm monocultures, nutrient management, and on integrations with crops or livestock. And she also worked on crop simulation modeling for yield gap analysis. And then best use of palm residues and new business models in oil palm cultivations in Southeast Asia. I can mention the country. So one of them is Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, also in Africa, in Ghana, Sierra Leone, and then in Latin America, in Colombia. So she traveled around the world. In recent years, she designed and participated in multiple interdisciplinary research projects on sustainable oil palm in Indonesia, such as Suspense. The name is the name of the project. Suspense, Sensor, Angin 1, Angin 2, Tiga 1, Tiga 2. Also have funded from Norwegian and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. And also acquired several smaller research funds and consultancies. So as the key partners, she has the key partners in Malaysia, MPOB, and Seni Palma in Colombia, and particularly in Indonesia, such as IPB, Unlam, and of course UGM, and University of Riau, as well as locally active NGOs, such as WRI, Setara Jambi, and Solidaridad. And in oil palm, she supervised 2 PhD students, Watis in 2019 and Hasanah 2019, and more than, listen carefully, 30 master students, which graduated in oil palm research topics, of which many were Indonesian graduates. So applause for her. But I'm not yet finished reading her CV. And then also from Wageningen University. In her group, she works together with 2 junior staff on oil palm related research, Lotte Waitis and Rosa de Vos. And she currently works with 2 oil palm related PhD students and 5 master students per year. So that's quite a big group, right? And also she actively engaged with international research partners, companies, local universities, corporate sectors, governments, non-government organizations, and certification bodies to jointly increase understanding and foster transformations towards a more sustainable oil palm sector. And also with Patricio Grassini, she was editor of a special issue on oil palm intensifications. You should check the journal. So this is a special issue called Oil Palm Intensifications in Agricultural Systems. The name of the journal is Agricultural Systems, which just became available online right now, so you can access the journal. And beside that, she gave me a list of her publications, but she selected only for the oil palm, and I counted for only the last 5 years, there are 21 publications, mostly in Q1 publication journals. So last year alone, 2023, there are 6 publications only related to oil palm. She exclude other topics, which means a lot. Which means a lot. So we will learn carefully. So please listen carefully all of the lessons that she gave to us right now. And I think I will give you time for the guest lecture from now. So stage is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the nice introduction. I think it's, I should not use that because I have this one.
Okay.
I think for you to understand, I'm an animal scientist, I work with plant sciences. So that is because I'm interested in farming systems. And farmers, they have crops, they have livestock, but we also look at their income. I do also do work on living income, for instance. So we look at the social, at the technical, at everything, even at the supply chain, because farmers are part of the supply chain. And we also look at landscape, because farmers are responsible to govern the landscape, the natural resources. So for us, the farmer is key for all the things that we do. Oh, this one don't work? Oh, okay, sorry. And you see the title of my presentation. It's Sustain Palm Program, because last year we got a grant from the Dutch Embassy together with Ibu Musalifa from Economic Affairs, which is in Indonesia the coordinating ministry for oil palm. She coordinates all the ministries, or the work in all the ministries. So she endorsed the program. And this is an implementation program. It's not a research program, it's an implementation program. So why do they give that to researchers? We said, okay, you can implement, but you need to monitor. If you implement and you don't learn from what you implement, at the end you are still at phase 1. But you need to move to phase 2, phase 3, etc. So if you implement something, you have to monitor. So although it's not a research program, we monitor closely what we implement. And this presentation is mainly to let's say, to motivate, to inspire you for some things that we are doing, and also to hope that we can work together in this monitoring. Because I think universities have a right to, and a duty to monitor, but also to bring innovation. So for those that don't know palm oil is a sector, I need to see myself. Palm oil grows in wet areas. The crop is there for 25 years. And then you cut it because you cannot harvest anymore, and then you plant again. And then the processing of the fresh fruit bunches that you see in front need to be done in 24 hours. So that is why the palm is always close to the mill, because the transportation distance. Yeah, it makes sense. You don't want to go hours and hours and hours on the road. And then there's one mill, has about 3,000 to 10,000 hectares. And employment, 1 person on 5 to 10 hectares if it's worker. And then 40% of the area in Indonesia is managed by smallholders. So 60% is big plantations, and everybody thinks it's only big plantations, but 40% of the oil palm area is smallholders. That's why they are so important. And then the crop is quite efficient. It gives about 3 tons of oil per hectare, which is about 6 times more than soybean or rapeseed. So it's a really efficient crop for land. And then it provides a good livelihood for farmers. People earn about 5 to 10 times more than they do rice, and they need less labor. And it provides a low-cost food for the world, because it provides cooking oil, which is already very important, but it also is in many, many products. If you go to the supermarket, I think more than 50% contains palm oil, but you don't know, you don't see it, but it's there. In cookies, in ice cream, in lipstick, in cosmetics, in shampoo, it's everywhere. So people don't know, but it is there. Of course, there's a lot of contestation about oil palm because it occupies quite some area. In Indonesia alone, about 16 million hectares. And then, some of it has been from forest before. About 20% is from forest. And that, when you cut the forest, it releases a lot of greenhouse gases. And it destroys biodiversity. So that's not a very good sign. Then, about 3 million hectares of oil palm are illegally in the forest in Indonesia. So that doesn't help for the image. First of all, deforestation doesn't help, but then illegal is even worse. Then 10% of the oil palm is on peatland. And if you put oil palm on peatland, the palm doesn't like wet feet. So you have to drain the water. And if you drain the water, the peatland starts decomposing and putting greenhouse gases in the air. So it's also not a very good idea. And finally, the mill, you see here the ponds downstairs. If the pointer does it, yeah. Here the ponds. If they're open ponds, then they emit a lot of methane, which is also not good. So the CO2 and the methane both contribute to climate change. And that's why there's a lot of contestation about oil palm, not only for biodiversity, which was the story before was always about orangutans. You don't hear nothing about orangutan anymore. Nobody talk about orangutan. Everybody talk about climate now. So now we have to think about climate. Of course, biodiversity remains important, but climate is now the big thing where people look at oil palm. So the greenhouse gases must go down. It means that land use change, putting palm on peat and putting palm where forest was, should stop. And if you stop expanding, but you still want more income, you need to do better on the existing hectares. And you're not allowed to expand, so you want to have more income, you want to be compensated for not expanding, so you need more on the existing hectares. And that's why we came up with this graph, and this is also the program. You see here, on the right-hand side, you see land saving. So what we propose is to do things better on the hectare so that we can save land. And if we save land, we save greenhouse gases and we save biodiversity. But we can only do it, and that's one on the left-hand side, if it also brings money. You cannot ask people to do something or to stop doing something if it costs money. It needs to bring money. And therefore we have 4 activities. The first one is increasing yield of palm per hectare. The second one is using the land better by putting crops in between the palm or by putting livestock in between the palm. Because if you do that, you don't have to put a crop on another hectare or you don't have to put a livestock on another hectare. So you save land. And then we do it also by improving the use of crop residues. I don't know if people from bio-based economy are here, but the idea is that if you use the crop residues, for instance, if you use the palm for wood, that means you don't need an eucalyptus plantation for wood. You can just use the palm for wood. So you spare land, as an example. And finally, in our program, we also try to find alternatives for oil palm on peat. Because if oil palm has to go from peat, then the water table has to go up. But then which crop can grow there? The farmer needs to be compensated. You cannot just say, go away. You have to give him something. So that's the idea of this program. And because it's an implementation program, we look at technology. But we also look at what are the financial constraints to implement things, especially for the mill, it's often costly. We look at the regulatory, what kind of law regulations may help or prohibit it. We look at markets. And finally, you say it only works when you can showcase. You have to show it works. Then people start understanding it. And you need to build capacity. If you find something that works, you need to build capacity. So we have two ways of implementing it. One is in living labs. Living labs is a location, probably you know better than me, is a location where you try out the things and where you together try to solve those issues. Yeah, you can do technology and then you start thinking what's the market, and then you start thinking but why doesn't it spread? Oh, there's a legislation that doesn't work, or we need money. Together you try to solve that. And community of practice, that is between living labs. So you have, for instance, a seminar like this, and all the participants in different places that have the same experience, they share. So you can learn faster. For living labs, you can only learn on the location, but for the community of practice, you can learn across locations. So that's the idea. There's an echo, but... So team one was... oh, I have to go back. So we have 4 ways to do it, as I said. So team one is I'm responsible for team one, which is the increase in yield, and it's also the integration. So these are the people we work with. It's from IPB and from Umlam. And yeah, we work with experiences in one location and bring it to the other side and the other way back. Oh. Yeah, that's okay. No, that's the last one. Let me go. Yeah, I was here. Yeah? Okay. So we did a large project, which was we tried to estimate with a model how much yield you can get in every hectare in Indonesia. Every hectare oil palm, that's a lot. So what we do, we look at weather stations, and we look at the soil, and we only looked at mineral soil because, as I was saying, we don't want it in the future on peat, so why would we calculate the future for peatland? We want to get away from peat. So this is on cropland, on mineral soils, and with the model, what we can do, this is years and this is yield. With the model, you can see this would be the targeted yield given by the model and given the climate in those locations and the soils in those locations. And the dots here are the actual yields for smallholders and big plantations. And we do that on every location. So we end up with this map. And what you see here is that for smallholders, they reach only 53% of the yield that is possible. So they have a big gap of 47% of yield that they don't reach for some reason. Which is a big loss, because if you look at all the hectares, and each hectare is only, let's say, 50% of its revenue, that's really a lot that you lose there. And you see over time also that this has been the situation in Indonesia. This is the area increase over time, which went exponential, but this is the yields per hectare, and it remains the same. So this yield that we see here has been the same for all those years. So every year you lose so much yield because you don't do the right things. That is the message here. And this is to explain that this is what the model calculates. This is perfect. This is when you could even irrigate. There's no constraint at all. And this is when you look at weather and soil data. And this is actual yield. So this is the gap that we talk about here. It's the gap between what if everything is perfect in management, but you have your constraints for climate and soil, and this is what really on the ground with all the other constraints, like diseases, like no fertilizer, etc. When we brought this out, all the conferences I went to afterwards on oil palm, the government showed the same picture, so they buy into the idea. We need to do better. We need to do better on the hectares. Okay. So now, why would we put livestock in oil palm? We put livestock in oil palm for 2 reasons at least. Here you see beef in Indonesia, and you see in grey the demand, and you see in blue, I think, the import, and in red the production. So you see there's a big gap between production and demand, and that is all imported, mainly from Australia. So Indonesia is not self-sufficient. For chicken, you see the increase in demand is huge for chicken, And I didn't put the graph, but all the chicken eat, for instance, maize, and Indonesia doesn't even produce enough maize for the chicken, let alone for people as well. All import. So if that is the case and you want to be self-sufficient, where are you going to produce all that feed? Where are you going to put all the cattle? And then the idea was, why don't we put it in the oil palm plantations? Plenty of space. Why don't we do that? And that's why it came about. So if we look at integration of oil palm or crops, there are a lot of assumed benefits. The assumed benefits are they close the income gap. And what does it mean? If you put oil palm in place, you have to wait for the palm to give fruit. And that takes a few years. So you do your investment and you have no income and you have to wait, sit and wait. Of course, it's much better if you have something in between that gives you annual income. So that's why cropping is really a good idea. It also gives you resilience in income. If you have double income, if you have different crops in one field, then if the one doesn't do good, the other perhaps does better. Or if the market of one goes down, perhaps the market of the other goes up. So you have more resilience in income. You may have higher biodiversity. You may have higher infiltration because you don't have bare soil, but you have something in between. You're safe on weeding. If you put cattle in your oil palm and they graze, that means you don't have to put herbicide. It's good for the environment, but also for the cost. Because the cattle is the weeding for you, doing the weeding for you. You may save on fertilizer. The cattle put manure, but you have to be careful there. If you graze the cattle and it put manure on the same field, it doesn't add any nutrients because it eats the nutrients from the field and then give it back as manure. So you don't save fertilizer then. You only save fertilizer if you feed the cattle extra, like palm kernel meal or something else, and then the manure comes to your field. Else you just recycle. Recycling also good because the nutrients, the weeds that go in the cattle, when they come out as manure, the nutrients are much better available for the plant. So you have some benefits, but it's not increasing nutrients if you don't feed the cattle also something extra. Else it's just recycling nutrients. Carbon sequestration. Is there more carbon in the field? Probably if you have if you don't have blanket spraying of herbicides so that you have bare soil, but you have biomass, you get more carbon in the field. And also if you have crops. Income to landless people. Why do I say that? I say that because often the owner of the plant or the owner of the cattle is not the same as the owner of the oil palm. So they invite farmers on their field, or the other way around, the farmer asks if they can go to their field and do their business. So then, yeah, you have the oil palm grower that has the benefit of not having to put herbicides, and then the crop grower can have land for free, or they have a small arrangement. So for landless people, there are plenty of landless people that move around to the replanting areas now, and then for the first 3 years that there's replanting, they negotiate a place in the palm plantations to do their business. And they live from that. They have quite good living from that. And of course, you can produce animal feed also in plantation. But there are a few questions or challenges. One is the labor input will be higher than when you only do oil palm. So if you would do it yourself, if you're an oil palm grower and you yourself, you put another crop there, it requires more labor from your family. It requires other skills and other inputs because what you know from oil palm is not the same what you know for watermelon or what you know for kacang koro. Or you need more skills and more inputs. It is a higher capital investment at the start, not when you have land sharing because then you are the palm grower and someone else is doing the inputs for the crop. But if you do it yourself, you have more investments. And you need to take care of an additional supply chain. It's not just the palm, but also the other crop has to go to a market. And then people are very worried whether the crops or the livestock is not competing with the palm. Because if you put something there and your palm production goes down, that's really not a good idea. It may have additional greenhouse gas emissions because the manure may emit also methane or CO2 to the air. And also if you put fertilizer on your crop, it may also lead to greenhouse gases. So it's not free. The soil may compact if you have the cattle walking around. There's studies, it seems not serious, but we need to study it. And the last point that came up just the first year that we talked to the farmers, effect on Ganoderma. The disease was not part of the program, but now we have to look at it because we didn't realize it was an important problem. Okay, let me go to a bit of the technicalities. You can do intercropping in two ways. Normally oil palm is planted 9 by 9 by 9 in a triangle. And the reason is, if it grows up, then the canopies together, they close completely the area. So they capture all the sunlight. Which also means that after 3-4 years, you cannot put any crops in between because it's dark. Huh? So that's why most of the intercropping is at the start. But you can also do the double row system, or some people know it as half stand. And what you do then, you put the palms a bit closer to each other, so that you create space in between. So what you see here, these palms are closer to each other, and here suddenly you have more space. And that space remains the whole 25 years, because the palms are not so close to each other that they close the area. This has been tested a lot with MPUB. So let's give a few examples of the things that I collected during the time. One was we did research on intercropping, on the permanent intercropping with black pepper. So this is black pepper, 3 rows, and outside you have the double rows of oil palm. Then we looked in Johor, we looked at pineapple oil palm integration. That came mainly from the pineapple firm that needed pineapple, didn't know where to go, and asked the palm growers if they wanted to do pineapple. Then we have here in Riau, no, not in Riau, in Serian, we have here oil palm banana intercropping. Farmers do it by themselves, but Sinamas is helping them. And here we see, and this is in Bengkulu, this is not smallholder, this is a big firm, and they want to try, so we have 15 hectares of oil palm watermelon integration on a big plantation to try out, because although many people say for smallholders it's a good idea, most plantations don't want it. And they don't want it for the reasons for labor, they don't want it for the reasons for extra market, etc. So they don't want it. So we have to convince them. And do we save land? Yes. We have the equivalent of 0.8 hectares of pineapple in the hectare of oil palm. So you save 0.8 hectares of pineapple. Here, this was already grown up, 0.4 hectares banana in an hectare of oil palm. And for watermelon, even you have equal amount of watermelon if there's oil palm or not. Because normally watermelon also has some space, and exactly in that space you have your palms. And as I said, sharecropping arrangements are possible. And for your benefit, I also put some references where you can find some stuff. This was the banana example, and the interesting thing here is it is the same household. It's not sharecropping, it's the same household. But while the man is responsible for the palm, at least he manages the palm market, the money, the woman was responsible for the banana. And they created, together with my colleague, Arita Suwano, they created a women's club. They start frying the banana, and they use also palm kernel shell to fuel the stove. So they use some residues also, and they sell it. And it's a really good business, and we're going to help them now with some regulations, because for food you have regulations. You cannot just start selling food, there are regulations. So we try to help them there. Is it land saving? Yes, we have banana in between the palm. Is it income? Yes. Is it gender positive? Yes. So there are quite some boxes ticked. These are things that are under study. We went to, we started the project and said, let's just look first what is in the area. So what we found cassava in oil palm, we found banana in oil palm, we found maize in oil palm, peanut, there's no example here, and watermelon. And I had a number of students, you see the names of the students that looked into those crops to see what's going on. And what we saw is that if we compare monoculture of the palms that have been planted all the same period, monoculture very well managed. If we compare that with monoculture not good managed, and we compare it with intercropping, then the intercropping is in between. So it means the intercropping can sort of compensate for some of the mismanagement of the palm. It's not what you want a well-managed palm and then a well-managed intercrop, but farmers often lack income or capital. So what they do, instead of managing their palm, they try to put something in between and hope that both benefit. So we have to look further in that, because it's not a model you want to promote, but you need to understand. And then we did a modeling exercise together with ICRAF. You saw the this one, which is the black pepper intercropped with oil palm. And we have a model that looked at below ground at different levels, if there's competition below ground with the roots, and above ground for the light. And then we used a model, and what came out is really interesting. If you look at oil palm monoculture, if you look at monoculture oil palm, which is here, and monoculture this was cacao, sorry, cacao here, then you see that if you put oil palm and cacao together, that the yield per tree of oil palm surprisingly is going up. So it's not competing, it is facilitating yield of oil palm. And you also see that the cocoa yield per tree goes up, which is interesting. So they don't compete, but they help each other. So you would say it's a perfect system. But then you look, for instance, at the net present value for the economist here. And then if you compare oil palm monoculture with oil palm cocoa or oil palm black pepper, you see that the net present value is most interesting if you do it with black pepper. But if you look at the return to labor, then the monoculture is the best, because monoculture oil palm is always less labor than when you put something else in between. And if you look at the benefit-cost ratio, then cacao is the best. So I think if we want to promote any of those things, we need to be clear to farmers, where is the benefit? Is it in the return to labor? Is it in the benefit-cost ratio? Is it in this yield that you save land? Or is it in the net present value? You have to explain to farmers, not these terms, but you have to explain what they can expect. Because it looks different. You make a different choice if you look at different parameters. So we have since we started last year, November, we have the year before, we have a living lab in Bengkulu and one in Central Kalimantan. Why is that thing there? No. This is watermelon. This is the team. This is my team, in the sense that there is an ex-student of mine. He started an enterprise. It's called PT Arconesia. And he does this. He finds first a buyer. Then he knows all the technical of the crop. Then he looks for a grower that wants to do it. And then he looks for oil palm farmer that accepts to have someone on his field. And then for watermelon, they even have selling points in Bengkulu. This is on 5 hours drive from Bengkulu, but the buyer comes collecting it. So they find it interesting enough to come collecting it. We had last year, we had 55 smallholders, 92 hectares with oil palm watermelon, and 11 with the company. And we developed 5 different business models, depending whether the farmer knows how to do it, whether it is a worker, whether the farmer needs capital or not. And there's all kinds of profit sharing models. And now we have 12 hectares of oil palm banana on the plantation, also to try out. And then in Serion, in Central Kalimantan, we have oil palm coffee integration. And that is also with the company. The company is the buyer, and the company buys and sells as origin coffee, having a premium price. And they provide the seedlings and all the technical assistance. And the farmer looks in his plantation and said, here is more light than somewhere else. Let's put my coffee here. So they know shade is not good, not too much shade. Shade is good, not too much shade. So they look for the brightest spot in the plantation and put there the coffee. And we're also going to do feed crops in South Kalimantan. But what you see here, our project, what we do, we facilitate this, the implementation. But for research, we monitor. We monitor the economics, we monitor the effect on oil palm, we monitor biodiversity, and we monitor the greenhouse gases and the carbon sequestration. And we also monitor the nutrient cycling. So that if there is good money, you also need to be sure that the other things are good. Then for livestock we have 2 places. One is in South Kalimantan, which is a perfect example. They have, the cattle looks good, they have different groups of cattle even. So they have weaners, they have calves, they have bulls, fattening. They have their own slaughterhouse, they also have meat available for the workers. And they have make some silage, they feed palm kernel cake, perfect. In Bengkulu, we have a sort of messy situation. The cattle is used to evacuate the fruits, but there's not a grazing system, and also the manure is sort of non-organized. So what we do, we bring Pakwayu from this plantation to Bengkulu to show how it works. And among cattle people, it's much easier to talk than someone come from outside. So it's like practices. That is like and then the person, Yanda, that is from PT Arconesia, from Bengkulu, he goes to South Kalimantan to learn the intercropping to people. to do that in a good way. And also we have now with IPB we also do feed intercropping, so not just horticulture, because the funny thing is in Bengkulu they want to do horticulture for the money, and in South Kalimantan they want to do cattle feed because they have a shortage of feed because there's a lot of replanting going on, so they want to be more in cattle feed. And also the Dimas is much more in cattle feed. And again we monitor everything. So an example here is this. This could be a planting system. Then the palm is normally planted 9 by 9 by 9, and then you have some corn in between, and then you can choose different things. You can put the corn on the market and use the stover for silage. You can also use both the whole crop for silage. That's what they do in the Netherlands. The whole maize crop goes to the cattle. Nobody eats it. It goes to the cattle. And yeah, this is examples of silage that is made. So there we have maize for feed. So that was team 1. Team 3, I go through it a bit differently than the sequence. This was oil palm on peat. And why do we don't want oil palm on peat? Because when you dry it, it decomposes, it releases CO2, and it becomes very susceptible to fire also. And I think everybody knows that the countries around Indonesia complain about the fires. So we shouldn't want to have those fires. And then also, because it is decomposing, the land goes down. It becomes lower and lower and lower. So finally, you have also flooding. So the current solution is that people talk about sustainable oil palm, like the RSPO and many other stakeholders, they pledge to have no oil palm on deep peat. But then if you are a farmer and you have to remove yourself, you want something else. You want other crops that are suitable for the peatlands, and you want a premium for your sustainable palm. You want to be compensated. And that's is important because it is the consumer that gives you the license to sell. If the consumer doesn't want it, you have no way to sell it. And here we have a small check dam to control the water tables. I don't know if you're aware of, there's a government regulation called Jangka Bena. Jangka Bena is a way to compensate farmers that are illegally in the forest. Because if you have 2 or 3 million hectares of illegal plantations, you get a real social problem if you tell all those people we start policing, we kick you out. That's not possible. So what the government decided, they said, as long as the palm is productive, you can stay, but you have to transform to forest, because it is in a forest area. And the transformation, they're really lenient, because the transformation may be with fruit trees. It doesn't have to be wood or forest trees. It may be fruit trees as well. So what they do, they transform the oil palm into a sort of social forestry. But after 25 years, the palm has to go. You're not allowed to replant palm, because the palm in the area is illegal. It is a forest area. It's in the middle of a forest area. But the government doesn't kick people out. They give them a different land title for social forestry, and they help them to put other trees in between. And you can imagine that you would do, there's no legislation yet, but you can imagine you would do something similar on the peatland. That you say, okay, you have to go from the peatland, but we help you to put some alternatives in place while the palm is still there. And at the end, the palm will be gone, but you still have a livelihood from the other crops. In combination perhaps with some artisanal way of adding value to them, because it's quite difficult to replace palm by something that is really remunerative. But you can think of small businesses associated to a crop that you cultivate. So that is the way we want to go about. And in the same team, we also look at carbon. And for carbon, you can think of carbon payments. So if you put something that you can get carbon payments. There's also the system of setting aside some high conservation value areas that you don't touch. Also companies do that. So part of the company area is not oil palm, it's still forest. But then, of course, you want to have compensation for it, because you have to maintain it and it doesn't bring any income. So you want either carbon credits or you want biodiversity credits. And you can imagine that also the integrated systems that we talked about, so these ones, they may perhaps also benefit from carbon credits. For instance, the intercropping with black pepper, it's a pepper tree, so yeah, perhaps. So, and you can also say perhaps we need to have a fund that people that go voluntary out of peat, they get payment for not emitting greenhouse gases. Because if they stay, they emit greenhouse gases, but if they go out and they raise the water table, you may also say we pay them for not emitting greenhouse gases, because you must not forget the government of Indonesia also signed up to all those treaties, the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement, the COP in Glasgow. They sign up for not emitting greenhouse gases for climate change and also putting carbon sequestration to mitigate climate change. So if in these systems we can help the government to show this contributes, it will also be interesting. So the last one that will be a bit less familiar to you is the biomass. Oil palm, 90% of the tree production is not oil. Sounds very inefficient. Only 10% is what we use as oil and the rest is not oil. But they can be used. So if you have here the tree, you have the fronds, which are the leaves. You have, of course, the fruit bunch. And you have the trunk. And the trunk becomes available at replanting. And then from the oil, you have the palm kernel cake, you have the palm kernel shell, you have the empty fruit bunches, and the fiber that has been pressed for the oil. And then you have crude palm oil, which is pressed from the fiber, and you have crude palm kernel oil, which is from the pit, and you have huge amount of wastewater, which is the palm oil mill effluent. So all these things become available, and the only thing we use is those oils, but the rest, what is going to happen with those? So my colleague, he is a bio-based economist, and he says we can use everything. So I looked in literature and I saw here that, okay, many of the residues we can use for feed. So the fronds you can use for feed, the kernel cake you can use for feed. So that adds value, and that also means you don't have to produce the feed somewhere else. So again, you save land and greenhouse gases. The empty fruit bunches, he is also technical, so he says if this empty fruit bunches, we put it together with the wastewater in a digester, we create a lot of energy. That energy can be used for the mill to turn around, and then we don't have to burn the shells and other things. So we play free the shells. We play free some biomass that is now used for the firing of the boiler. We don't do that. We use biogas, and then we have freed some materials. And the good thing is also that if you use that biogas, you still have the slurry, and the slurry has all the nutrients are in the slurry. Nutrients don't go in the biogas. Biogas is just carbon and hydrogen. So what you see, the slurry contains still all the nutrients. So that you can bring back to the plantation, either compost it or as liquid. So what he is doing, he's looking at circularity, and he's trying to distinguish always between nutrients, carbon, and other stuff. And then he says, can we separate those and use them better? And one thing that we look into, this is the trunk at the replanting. The outside can be peeled and can be used for this material. I don't know what it's called in English. Or pressed for, if you see here a graph, this is the trunk height, and this is the amount of starch. And you see the higher up you go, so here around the 8 to 10 meter, the highest meters, we have like 2/3 of the total starch that is in the trunk. So if we cut the trunk in two pieces, the lower part we use for wood, and the upper part we use the starch, then we have a much better use of it. And the good thing is also, if that starch can be used for making sugar, and people are doing it, and I know one enterprise that sells its sugar to Unilever, so it's a really good product. And we can also use the starch to make bioplastics. And it's also good that it is removed from the field, because if you put the trunk on the field and you let it decompose, the starch will go into the air as CO2, or it will be methane if it is stacked. So yeah, instead of creating a climate problem, you're going to use it for materials. So there is an example of that. We took out this part, and we sent it to the laboratory. And there you see that we make bioplastic of it. So this is the starch that has been, this is the oil palm material, this is the starch, and this is the bioplastic. So it's possible, the technology is there. And how much land would you save then? There's about 5 tons, a bit more, 5 tons of starch per hectare oil palm at the moment that you need to cut it for the regrowth. So that if you would replace, you would cultivate cassava for starch. You can say, how much starch do I get for my oil palm and how much hectares of cassava would I need to have the same amount of starch. And you see here that you save land. And in Indonesia, you would save for the replanting and the existing hectares now, you would save about 450,000 hectares of land, but of not needing to use to make cassava starch, but using the starch in the palm. And you see in other places the cassava is doing worse, like here, cassava is doing worse, so your palm is even doing better than cassava. But they have a very small area, so they save less hectares. But of course we also have to look how much biogas, how much greenhouse gases are saved. So if we look here, we see we work on all those things. And for the moment, we are monitoring. So I cannot show a lot of results. We are monitoring, but it's to invite you also, to, if you want to be part, we can have students together, we can also work together for the monitoring. And then we found a key bottleneck that we didn't count on, because nobody talks about it. Frankly, if you ask people what's going on, they say, yeah, the fertilizer price is high and the market is low. Nobody talks about Ganoderma. And then we found that it was often present, Ganoderma, it's bud rot. You see here, this is what you see above ground. It's like a sort of mushroom, but it also is below ground. So below ground, the roots that touch, then the Ganoderma can spread, but here it spread with spores. The experts are in your faculty, so if you want to know more, please go to phytopathology. I'm an agronomist, but Ibu Siti is there, and she can help you. So farmers often detect it too late. They see nothing below ground, they only see this. But then the palm already heavily affected and you get all kinds of reduction in yield. Also, when farmers notice yield loss, they not always attribute it to the disease. They think my tree is old or I forgot to put fertilizer. They don't necessarily say, oh, it is because of the disease. And that means they also take no action. And if they take no action, the disease will spread and spread and spread. So it's really serious. And large plantations, they let it go sort of till a cutoff point. If it is too much, then they have to do drastic. They either cut off the whole plantation and replant everything, or they start burning. They do all kinds of things, but they look at cutoff points. So if it's small, they try to contain it, but if it's big, then they need to take real action. And what we see over time is if you have one Ganoderma in your field, over time you get more. And if you have in your first cycle of 25 years, and you go to the second cycle, you get more. So we think it's important to learn how to deal with it when you have it in your plantation, but also how to deal with it at replanting, because apparently that is a moment that suddenly there's much more afterwards. So something goes wrong there. So appropriate measures need to be developed for palm cultivation in the replanting phase, but also in the cycle. And now I want to have a very short note on Colombia. In Colombia they have another disease, and that disease is called bud rot disease. And the palms are they're mainly planted in pastures. And they have really high tree mortality. You see it like a wildfire. And they started breeding for resistance. So they have now a variety that is resistant. But there are much differences with the old variety. They have a different quality of oil. They are more susceptible to drought. The fronds are larger and more. The bunches were smaller, but then more. There's all kinds of pollination difficult, hand pollination necessary. So there were all kinds of issues with this new variety that if you implement it, a lot of things have to change in response to it. But also, if you have a resistant variety, you know resistance can be broken. So it's also important to realize that if people think now we have a resistant variety, we don't need to do anything anymore, in the few next years they may have a big trouble again because resistance can be broken. The pathogen is very clever. It finds a way around. So that's why it's really important to look at this. And then I wanted also to share a small thing on Africa. In Africa, that is where the palm comes from Africa. Has been imported in Indonesia and Malaysia and become hugely successful, much more successful than in Africa. But now they're catching up. But what you see there, they have still artisanal way of producing palm. So they have here the small fruits, and they process at home for red oil, and they don't send to the factory. And just now that they start having an industry. So it's highly diverse, and the old trunks here are not used for sugar, they're used for alcohol. So they cut them down, they drain, and they just wait till they start fermenting, and then they have palm wine. We thought in Indonesia is perhaps not the best solution. I don't think many people will want palm wine. Better to take the sugar. Yeah, but this is still very artisanal, and many small, and you see also they climb the tree. They don't have the tool, they climb. They collect the fruit like that. So it comes from here. You see in Indonesia, Malaysia, they made it perfect in another way. And now it goes back to Africa to help them to also set up the industry. And here you see how they process it. So you see here, they cook to make it, and then here they press. This is the oil that they sell. And it's mainly a women's business. So they sell the oil on the market in bottles. And it is delicious, I must say. It is a red oil. It has a lot of vitamin A, vitamin E. It's very healthy. What we see here is go to the factory. It has to be neutral, because then you can put it in lipstick, in ice cream, etc. If it's orange, it will be complicated. Nobody wants it. So it is here, if you have it in the factory, it's sort of low taste, low color. But here, this is high taste and high color. So it's a totally different system. So, inspired by the fact that Ganoderma was a problem, we try now to set up a new program together with UGM and with Seni Palma in Colombia on the two diseases. And we want to make it comparative, because the pathogen for the diseases are in both countries, but in each country only one disease. The other pathogen does do nothing, which is strange. So why? Should we be afraid that the other disease also come? There's come the other diseases also to Indonesia. And then we think it may be even more predominant when climate change, perhaps that can trigger it, so we have to be careful there. Field management change, people do other things in the field. And the policy change, with European Union regulation, you're not allowed to sell any product anymore to Europe if it is from forested area. It means that the palm needs to keep cycling on the same hectares, which will increase Ganoderma all the time. So it also will affect how much Ganoderma we have. So we look at host pathogen environment interactions, but we are very aware that everything depends on people. It depends on people, whether they do plant breeding. It depends on people, how they manage the residues. It depends on people, how they manage the disease. It depends all on people. Policy depends on people. So in our program, we have a strong social aspect. It's not only technology, it's not only phytopathology, it is phytopathology, it's agronomy, it is agroforestry, because that may also help, and it is social. So I'm here now to negotiate how we can do that, and we hope to get funding soon, and then let's hope. Thank you. Was long, no?
Thank you so much for Dr. Maya Slingerland for the lecture. So give applause again for the lecture. And I think there is a lot of knowledge and sharing experience that we can learn from the talk. So we open a discussion session for that. But don't forget, not only we are here that watching the lecture, there's also people watching from the YouTube and Zoom. I think we can also interact with them. So now I open one session's discussions first, and then afterwards we can, the second one we can open discussions for the Zoom or YouTube. So please raise your hand. So I think for the first sessions, we will have 4 questions first. We will start from Arif.
Thank you, Andi. Bu Maya, I like to confirm about the Ganoderma, the spreading Ganoderma, but by cattle. You said that, do you know how's the issues starting? it is from the smallholder farmers or from the big company? Because you said that in the big company, they don't allow cattle to go to the field, right? But in the small farmer, a lot of the farmer can do the, they allow the cattle to. So I have a thing that it should, it must be the issue come from the farmers, not from the big plantation. But I don't know. But if you have information, why? Because no, the issue is a big issue, yeah. And if it is come from the farmer, the smallholder, I think we have to prove that. Because sometimes, yeah, the farmer just have assumption. It is true from the cattle, or it happened, the disease is already happened, and then the cattle came, and they claim that it because of the farmer. So perhaps you have information about that. And the second question is about also the spread of the Ganoderma, yeah, because some people say that it is come from the spore, right? But actually it's come from the root, yeah, the contact of the root mostly, and that's why the development of the disease is not fast. Because here in epidemiology of plant disease, we have two kind of spread of the disease. It is exponential or not, right? And if the disease, the Ganoderma disease, is spread by the spore, yeah, I think the spread will very fast. Yeah. But we know that the Ganoderma will be spread after 25 years or less, yeah, 20 or 25 years. It's mean that it's not possible. It comes from the spore. But yeah, it is from, we have a simple interest disease, and also what is exponential spread of the disease. So it's perhaps different with the bad drum disease from Kuliah, yeah, because it is the Phytophthora, and the Phytophthora have spore, and it goes to the also air. Yeah, it is spread by the wind. So I think because there is no Phytophthora in here in oil palm, so I think the spread must be faster than the Ganoderma. So perhaps you have information about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for the questions. I think for us to have a direct discussions, one questions, and then you can also answer.
So first of all, thank you for the question. I'm not a phytopathologist, and also a lot of things are not known. That's why we do the project. But for instance, I was in Pontianak last Monday on the oil palm cattle integration congress, and everybody there really concerned to prove or not prove what is the role of cattle, because they cannot continue cattle in oil palm if there is everybody suspects the cattle to be host or to be doing it. So they already also make consortium together with Brin to try to find out how it works. But if you compare with cattle and without cattle, you don't see much difference. Also, people walk in plantations. We also spread. If you say it's above ground, we would also spread. So it's not clear. And the other thing, whether it's from smallholder or from plantation, if it is below ground, it will stay close to you. Because the route will not go 20 kilometers, so it will stay close to you. Indeed, if it's spore, can go further. But we want to investigate here what is the role of cattle, but also if intercropping, for instance, can host antagonists. You have the roots from a plant you put in between, and perhaps it hosts another microbiome that is stronger than Ganoderma and can push back Ganoderma. So these things we will investigate in the project. And we will work with smallholders and with company to be sure that we capture both sides. So I cannot give you the answer. I can give you congratulations for the question, because that's exactly what we try to sort out. Yeah. And we are good because we have the phytopathologist on both sides. We have an interdisciplinary team at both sides. Yeah. Oh, and in Kalimantan already Ganoderma in small palm. First cycle. So that's also worrying us. why in Sumatra it takes 2 cycles before it starts getting a real problem, and in Kalimantan first cycle, young palm already. Yeah, probably, yeah. So, but that's also something. Which factors then are conducive for Ganoderma and which factors are not? And is it localized, or is climate change also affecting? Is management? That's what we try to find out in this project, so that we can give better recommendations.
Thank you, Bu Maya. So because we have enough time, I think I will ask Pak Arif again. Do you have any following response or questions?
About the information about the rot disease in Colombia, it is faster spreading, or because we haven't the pathogen yet.
Yeah, in Colombia it is sorry. In Colombia, they started developing this resistant variety because it was spreading so fast that they have 5 big areas where they do oil palm. One area complete wiped out. They planted now this variety. I read in the newspaper in March that in another area 20,000 hectares affected, and they expect end of the year all the hectares infected. So it's going like wildfire. But then you can also understand that even if you plant resistant variety, you have to be careful, because Phytophthora very good in changing itself and become aggressive again. In the Netherlands we have potato. Potato is there for a long time. We still have Phytophthora, and we have a lot of good researchers. Everybody knows it's a big disease. We just try to stay in the rat race, to stay ahead of the pathogen. So we have to start thinking differently. We cannot keep on doing that. We cannot keep on bringing resistant varieties. We need to do something at the pathogen level to try to contain it, that it doesn't become a disease. So I think really we need to go that way now, because it's just like a rat race. You have a new variety in 2 or 3 years, broken. You need a new variety again. You can't win this at the end. So we need to think more about microbiome. We need more about integrated systems, so that there is less fast spread. I think really we have to go that way. And a lot of people don't agree, but that doesn't matter. We have to find out. If it works, then people will agree. But if it doesn't work, okay, nothing lost.
Yeah, I think we start with great discussions. Is it enough, Paddy? Okay, thank you. So for the second questions, I think I will remind participants from the watching online. Do you have any questions? If you have any questions, please write your questions in the comments so we can check. Do we have questions from the participants online? There's not here. Okay. So next questions, I think from audience here. Please raise your hand again. Okay. I think we start from this first. Oh yeah. Sorry.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's an honor and pleasure to meet you. I am Bena. Actually, I just graduated from Master of Agronomy in here, and right now I'm working as a research assistant for my professor in Faculty of Forestry, and we are working on a proposal for policy brief regarding agroforestry as a small food estate. Hopefully we can get the funding. So I would like to know the adaptability and the sustainability of agroforestry system, especially for profitable commodity and primary food crops, because I found a problem which has been a question for me for a long time, especially in East Java, because the farmers in East Java tends to be hesitant to adopt the agroforestry system because it is considered as not profitable as the monoculture. And I think that I've read several of your publications regarding the policy of agroforestry, and I think one of the biggest takeaway from it is the multi-level management, the importance of multi-level management, and that's why I would like to know how do you perceive the the adaptability and the sustainability and also the stability of agroforestry system in the future. And I'm also
Okay.
and also regarding the recycling for the oil palm biomass, which you explained earlier, I found that I think the farmers will find it a hassle to recycle the biomass. That's why I think there is a need to policy to manage that. How do you perceive that problem? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We have another important question.
Thank you for this question. So first of all, if you put trees with palm, they likely compete because they're in the same strata. They're all high, they all want the light. So it's not so easy to have a normal planting distance and then put other palms, other trees in between and make an agroforestry system. There will be competition. There will be some facilitation, but certainly competition. So that's one thing. The point is, if what you lose in palm, if you can compensate that by the product of the other crop. Because finally it's about what you get from 1 hectare. If you get a little bit less palm, but you get a very high durian, perhaps it's worth it. So I cannot say for the farmer, but let's say economically you could calculate whether it's worth it or not. But you're right that all the agroforestry systems that I know of that are profitable, first of all, it takes like 5-6 years before the system is so well established that you really can think about profit. You get some money in between, but it's not optimal yet. So do farmers have the time to wait for that? That's one question. Second question, the most benefits that are attributed to agroforestry are for the soil, and it only works if you recycle biomass, which is a lot of work. I'm in a committee for a PhD thesis that has been submitted and will be defended very soon. And that person really teased out what is really happening on the soil. And he also found that if you don't do all this biomass recycling from all the species that are in the agroforest, you even have to prune some of the trees and so on. If you don't do that, then the effect on the soil is quite limited. So my answer is like twofold. One is economically, it takes time to settle. Then you need to choose as farmer, do you want to be engaged in all the supply chains for all the species that are there? Have you time to wait for optimal yield, and then do you have time to manage your residues or your biomass? So to me, and I'm an agronomist too, I believe more in simpler systems. That was showing, for instance, in palm with black pepper, then it is sort of agroforestry, but it's not mixed. It's really on lines, it's well managed. Each tree can also be managed clearly. Then it's much easier than when you have a very mixed system where you need really to think about each species. What does it bring me today? Which market should I go to? How do I manage it? And can I, in between, manage all the biomass that I need to keep the system going? So to me, full agroforestry is not so simple. There are very few examples where it works. One is Wild Asia in Malaysia. If you want to have some inspiration, you have to look at them. You can find them on the web, Wild Asia. And then, but of course, it depends where you start. If you start from a monoculture forest and you make agroforestry, it's different when you start from a field of maize and you make agroforestry, or you start from a palm field and you make agroforestry. So where do you start? And the one that I presented here is the people have only two choices. They have to leave the area because they're illegal in the forest, or they're allowed to stay, but then they need to reforest, and then they need to pick the trees that are the most profitable. And then we will study it because it's interesting. There they need to cut the palm trees at the end, so they perhaps are not so interested in the competition. That's what the government thought, but the farmers don't want you. If you look there, you see they plant the trees around the palm area, not in the palm area. The farmers are aware there's competition. So if you plant something in it, you really need to get good revenue, because else you don't do it, because palm is always the best. So it's not going smoothly, but it is an option, because the option for the farmer is only twofold. You leave, or you stay and you make the best of it. And then if they have time enough, probably they can get to an agroforestry system that is really good in economic and also environmental, but you need time. And that's also why we talk about carbon credits. If carbon credits can help to buy that time, because you get credits for the trees that grow and that they sequester carbon, then you have another income source already. So it may help to have earlier your break-even point. You have earlier enough profit from your enterprise than when you have to wait for all the crops to start producing. So we can help with government regulation, but I don't believe in forcing people. That won't work. I think you have the carrot and the stick. So the stick is you're not allowed to deforest anymore. You're not allowed to go and peat in future, for sure. That is the stick. That is the law and regulations. The carrot is you have to present people with an interesting alternative. You cannot just have the stick, you have the carrot. You have to add something attractive, what people can do instead. And for some people, agroforestry may be an option, but not for all. That's my short answer.
Give applause for the discussion. Our discussion is getting deep, I think. Do you have any follow-up questions? No? Okay. So let us check again on the online participants, from the online participants. Is there any questions yet? Okay, so back to this room again. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. Yeah. Please.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, ma'am. Let me introduce myself. My name is Jonathan, and I was working in Bamboo Plantations for about 6 years before. But I'm not working in research matters because I work in operational. I was leading like a division at the time. And then I just want to ask you one question about palm oil mill effluent.
Yeah.
It is very interesting because I really know that the palm oil itself, it is produced by the mill daily.
Yeah.
And then the ratio is about 55% from the weight of the fresh wheat bunch that is processed by the mill daily. So I can say that the mill every day they produce about 500 meter cubics of palm oil. So I just want to ask you, ma'am, what do you think about the possibility to use the palm oil to support the intercropping systems? I mean, is it possible for us to use the palm oil as the source of the nutrient for other crops? For example, if you were to plant like staple food like rice or maybe like horticultural products, is it possible us or we to use that palm oil? So I can say that we can use the palm oil to support other crops in the middle of the palm oil area. And the second question is, ma'am, that I told you before that I was working for 6 years before in palm oil, and then I know that the big corporations always think about economical values. They think about harvesting access, for example, because based on your presentations, you plant other crops at the middle of the block. I mean, like for example, at the harvesting access. So can you just give us about suggestions how we can convince the company to follow our spirit? Because I think it's very good spirit, man. We need about 17.5 million hectares of new lands to support our food, especially in our country. So can you just give us any suggestions how to push the private corporations, the big player? I mean,
because I was working in a very big company, and then I don't know how to change their mindset.
Yeah.
So I think that's my question.
Okay.
Okay, for the first question about the palm oil has all the nutrients in it, so I don't see any limitation to put it also on other crops. But you have always to look at the need of the crop. A crop needs a certain amount of nutrients in a certain combination, so you have to compare what is in the palm oil and what the crop needs. So that's the first question. The second question is, of course, one of the reasons why we do this is we know smallholders already do, but often not good. So we want to improve at smallholder level. And then companies don't want. So we work with company to test on their plantation, small like 15 hectare. 15 hectare banana, 15 hectare watermelon is on land of the, not on the smallholder land, on land of the plantation. And we think if we make good demonstration, it may be more convincing than talking. And then we only promote the first 4 years, 3 years, because there's not much operation going on then. They only do fertilization. You don't do pruning yet, you don't do harvesting yet. So that you don't need to go up and down often in the plantation. So it's not blocking your operations later. If it's later, first of all, it's too dark, you cannot put crops, so you need to put the palm wider. And that will affect on your production as well. So then you really need to be convinced that you want to have another enterprise that brings a lot of money in your plantation. For the cattle is, the break-even point is not in year one. It takes time also. So that's one of the reasons why big companies don't want, because they have to invest first in cattle, and then they have to feed it, and they have to have menders, and they have people to take care of it, and they have the supply chain. They don't want a second supply chain. So what you see often, and that's what we try, business models in which the company is not worried. So the watermelon, the company does nothing. They just give the land. And Yanda from PT Arconesia, he takes care of everything. The workers, the seed, the buyer, and they do just profit sharing. But what I was thinking would be a good model as well, if you have a company and you're replanting 1,000 hectare, replanting, it means for 4 years you don't have to harvest there. So you have too much labor, because the labor was there to harvest and now they don't harvest anymore. So perhaps we can train that labor to stay in the plantation and do the intercropping, and then they earn back their salary, so you can keep them. Because if you worked in plantation, you also know if laborers are gone, to get them back, it's not easy. If you have good labor, you better keep them. So instead of putting them on the street, why not give them something to do? You can do two models. You can say you can do it for yourself. You can stay on the plantation, live in your house, and we allow you to do this intercropping to make a living. That's one. Or you can say we keep on paying your salary, but you do intercropping for us, like you do palm for us. And then they don't get the revenue of the intercrop because they get salary. So there's two business models. But you can only do that with a horticulture crop that gives a lot of income. Like the watermelon, we had like €3,000 income per hectare. So there's and you can do 3 cycles a year. So that will be €9,000. I don't know what the salary of a worker is, but €9,000 seems quite good for a year to me. So you can think of models that the plantation has no trouble, but that it is organized. And for the Pakwayu in South Kalimantan with the cattle, there's one owner of the plantation that takes care of all the plantation stuff, and there's one, he is the one from they have a sort of enterprise for the cattle, and they do rotational grazing. So there's not one cattle moving around by itself. They have small fences that they put in place, and they put the cattle there for 2 days, and then they move them to another block, and they put them for 2 days, move them to, and they rotate over the plantation. So it's very easy to manage for the plantation. There's not cattle everywhere. It's only in the block where they graze. They know, and in that moment they are not going to fertilize and not going to do anything else because they don't want to interfere with each other. But if you communicate clearly and you have a good manager for the livestock, then I think many of the problems are gone, because also the plantation doesn't have to take care of the supply chain. It doesn't have to. It's 2 enterprises. Each have their responsibility. So I think you need to make it easy for companies, and also you need to engage them. So that's why we do the intercropping on plantation. We also talk with Gapki to see it. They say they're very skeptical. Say, oh, let's think about business models will be interesting for plantations, and let's see if it moves. You never know, but that is why we did this project. You saw we look at, it's an implementation project. It's a living lab, is showing. Community of practice is spreading the news. And the other things is looking at financial barriers, looking at government barriers, looking at all the barriers you can think of, and see if we can deal with them. That's the purpose of this project. It's not only technical. Technical is a small part of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was research-based suggestions, right? So we still have time. So do you have any follow-up questions or response?
Maybe a very short feedback, about the pony.
Yeah.
Because you said to us that just choose the plants and then sorry.
Yeah.
Can I repeat again? I want to ask you about the heavy metal contents in the pomade.
Yeah, there shouldn't be. Yeah.
Yeah, because I ever read some journal that explained to us that pomade itself contains a high amount of Cu, cuprum, and also zinc.
Yeah.
So can you just give us about this? What plants that is suitable with the conditions?
Yeah.
Because I can say that we cannot use or implement like all of type of plants. I mean, like we must choose between a lot of options.
Yeah.
Basically from the conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. So there's one thing that is my colleague. You see here, Walter Elberser, the top one. He's the one that looks at the mill and all the products going in and going out. And I'm the agronomist. And another person, Peter van der Meer, he's the one that's working with the peatland. So we work as a team. So if you would bring that question to us, I would go to him and would say, first, can you give me exact composition of pomade? Then, is there a way to remove things that are not good for the plant, that is cheap, so that we can still use it? If you say there's a lot of zinc, I believe you, I don't know, if there's a lot of zinc. You can also look, how does the zinc come there? Is it during the processing? Perhaps we need to change something in the processing. Because there's also a big fight about the quality of the oil. There are some substances there, and they come not from the field, they come from the mill. From the type of processing with chlorine and the bleaching, and then it can end up in the oil. And so there's all kinds of things going on, but I'm not the processor person, that is him. So if you have questions like that, whether there's something in the pomade that we cannot, why we could not use it, and how it does come there, and whether we can treat it, that would help. But he also does, for instance, you burn the, because you were in the plantation, you burn the shells and the other things in the boiler to have the boiler warm up. But if you use the biogas, you don't need it anymore. So then you have all these things left. And they want to sell it as renewable energy to Japan. They make pellets of it and they sell it. And then Japan said, no, we don't want it because there's too many nutrients in it. And if you use this in our machinery, it will damage our machine. So then you have to think, if I want to sell it, I need one step in between where I remove the nutrients so that only the carbon goes in the product. So he's the guy that thinks about all those things, where to do which processing to make sure that the destiny of the final product is suitable for its use. And that goes for pomade, for fertilizer, that goes for the shells, for renewable energy, etc. But I think the pomade is also used on the plantation, no? They just flow it.
They just pump it.
Yeah.
Pump it with a high power pump.
But then the zinc is still there.
Yeah.
The zinc will be there.
Yes.
And also they compost it, and the zinc will be there. So I never hear complaints about it, so I don't know exactly where the point is, but we will see. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm giving you not the final answer. I'm saying we can talk together and see where the processing needs to be to make things more suitable. Or whether you can choose to plant. There are plants that can do high zinc, but perhaps not a plant that's very profitable, so why would you do that? Yeah. And I forgot to say one thing. To convince people that the companies to do intercropping or crop livestock integration can also be, that's why we do this Ganoderma project, it can also be that putting a plant in between may stop the spread of Ganoderma, because the roots of that plant can host antagonists, can host the enemy of the Ganoderma. So we will, in this new project, if we get the funding, we will also work with a very big company, I mean a really big company, because they're interested. And that means then they may want to do intercropping not for the crop, but for fighting the disease. So you have to find the reason why people would change. It can be economics, they can also not want to change because of logistics. It's also a very, very big issue, but they can also need to change because of this fighting disease, you never know. So we take them on board in this project so that they experiment with us together, and we draw the conclusions together. And if they convince, that's very important because they know all the growers. And it's talking to your family, no? If you're a grower and you're a grower, you're a grower, you have the same type of problem. So if you solve it, for sure the others are interested. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Maya. It's a good starting point for further discussions. Yeah. So give applause again for the discussion. And we still have time. If you can see the wall clock behind you, we still have like 7 minutes to 10 minutes. But I noticed that Dr. Maya not yet like drink. Maybe you have a break for like drink. Please.
Just keep on asking questions.
Yeah. So if I have questions for you all, after we learn from Dr. Maya's presentations, let us think maybe only one word. Can you think one word that can describe what you learned today? Maybe you might not answer that question just for yourself. I mean, what is one word that can represent you learned today from Dr. Maya? Okay, that's for yourself, right?
And now I'm curious.
If you're curious, maybe next persons that will have questions can say that words and then can say their questions. So again, please raise your hand if you have questions or comments. Yeah. Please say one word that you think about. Thank you.
One word. Example.
Example.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Doctor. My name is John X. I interested with intercropping. We know that the intercropping can improve our land productivity. So, which is we not only harvest one crop from same land. I think my question quite similar to Mr. Joe. Is there intercropping in Indonesia, based on your point of view, science point of view, can be more wide commercial as well the monoculture of oil palm? Because we know that intercropping is basically is Indonesian farming culture. We know that Indonesian farm not only plant one crop at the same land, but for oil palm, we also know some of the big company, try this, research this, and some of them maybe about 20 years ago or 10 years ago, but until now we didn't see it like commercial as monoculture. So based on your point of view, what is the problem for Indonesia? And how science like us can contribute to solve the problem? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I gave a few answers already. One is people don't like a new supply chain because they have to worry about it. So if you have a company and you have really serious intercropping, you just not do it as a sideline. You should do it as a business. So you need someone in the company responsible for that intercrop and do all the things for that intercrop. Not just I'm doing palm and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Then it will never work. That's one thing. Then secondly, it's not only choice. I mean, 20 years ago, perhaps they test. 10 years ago, they test. But also the society around us is changing. So now there's a big push for regenerative agriculture, for climate-smart agriculture. There may be more reasons, other reasons to do intercropping than only profit. If your soil gets better, you get better water holding capacity. It may help you in times of drought, for instance. If your soil is better and it will fight Ganoderma, it will help you in time of disease. So it's not just the economic, but you see over time there are more things becoming more important. Also, the public is really against monoculture. I can tell you, if you go to Europe, you say monoculture, they're almost killing me. Especially for oil palm. But I say, yeah, it's the most efficient way, but if we can make combinations that oil palm is still profitable or more profitable, and we have the additional benefits that are becoming more important. All the companies also ask to us scientists, what is regenerative agriculture? What is it? And what does it bring us? And if we say only, yeah, it's good for the soil, they say, so what? You have to say, what's the functionality of regenerative agriculture? What does it bring me? Does it bring me better resilience in time of drought? Does it bring me less disease? Does it bring me, I can save fertilizer because there's in the case of cattle, because the cattle is better in recycling. So we have to have all the science in place. Yeah, as scientists, we have to have all the science in place to prove those claims from regenerative agriculture. Because everybody's saying it does this, it does that, but very few did research on it. It's all, I can tell you, for some things, for instance, for oil palm cattle integration, I can tell you, I went to Colombia 4 years ago, and I said, you know, in Indonesia they do oil palm cattle integration and they do oil palm intercropping. And they say, we don't do that. I said, why not? Yeah, we put cattle on pasture, so we have no deforestation problem. And I said, okay, we put oil palm on pasture, so we don't have deforestation problem, so we don't have a market problem. And then I asked, okay, you have pasture and you put the palm. Where's the cattle now? And then it becomes very silent, because if your cattle is not on the same land, it's somewhere else, no? For sure. You need more land. So that is something. Then I said, why don't you put it in between? Yeah, the diseases and problems and this, okay. I said, why don't you do intercropping? You have this big disease that wipes out your whole plantation. What if you had another crop there? You would not have so much economic loss, because this disease only attacks oil palm. Suppose you had oil palm coffee integrated. The disease hits your palm. You still have your coffee. Now not. The palm is hit and the whole area is devastated, I can tell you. Everybody lost. 4 years ago I was there. 2 years ago, they have the International Oil Palm Conference. They asked me for two keynotes. One on intercropping and the second on regenerative agriculture. Two. That's 2 years after the first time I came there. This year, last week, they put a review paper out on oil palm cattle integration. And the review paper has only citations from Indonesia and from Malaysia as examples. So they want to fast-track learning. They have no experience, but they want to base it on your guys, on what you all know. So that's how research works. You do something in one context, it may be for 20 years on the shelf, and suddenly it gains traction. Suddenly it is important because it solves another problem, it fits another situation. That's why science, sometimes you think, why am I doing this? Nobody listens. Not today. They may listen tomorrow. And that's what I find so exciting, because I went there with my ideas and they said, no. Even at the conference, they said, don't talk about livestock because we don't want people to do it. There's so many problems, we don't want it. Now they bring out a review paper, so they start rethinking. You see, these things happen, and it's only because you did all this research that they start thinking about it. So, yeah. Perhaps the big companies will take a while, but there may be one day it may be the solution for any of their problems, and they will go like this because they can easily invest. Who knows? I always believe in that things will turn out right, really. Maybe on the shelf for a while, but if we have it on the shelf, we can also get it off the shelf when we need it. So don't get worried. If something is not taken up immediately, it's never wasted. There will always be a moment or a place where it fits. But you need to know. You cannot just say, yeah, you should do this, and you have no clue if it works or not. That is not fair. Not fair to the smallholders, not fair to a commercial company. That's just not fair, because they have to put their effort, their labor, their money. We are just scientists. We don't have any risk. So we should not tell them things that are not true. We should be investigating. We should know what we're telling. And we give them choice. Like I showed with the intercropping, with the cacao and with the black pepper. Yeah, if you have less labor, perhaps you shouldn't do it because it's very labor intensive. If you have investment money and you want a high return on investment, perhaps you should do it because it's a very good investment. But farmers need to know what is the choice. And we as researchers, we can give them the choice. Instead of stories like it should be good and it's interesting, no, choice. Science-based choice. The agroforestry is the same. We can say, yeah, it's good for nature. Yeah, I'm sorry, farmer has to eat. It can be good for nature, but he needs an income. Yeah, we as foreigners, we can say, yeah, everybody should do agroforestry. I'm paid my salary by the university. I'm not paid from the land. So I tell someone to do agroforestry and he just can't feed his family. Is that correct? No, it's not correct. If I promote, I need to promote correctly. I need to be clear on the risk. I need to be clear on the opportunities. And then the farmer can choose by himself. Does he do it? Does he not do it? Does he try the risk? If you experiment together, he can see by himself, herself. There's a lot of female farmers also. So that's my point on it. I think as a scientist, you need to be able to give good advice or good choice. Not what to do, but what, if you do something, what is the result? That you should be able to say. Not you should do this or should do that, should do that. No. If you do this, then this is likely the result. That's what farmers need. They need to have an idea what is the result. So I cannot convince the big farmers now, the big companies now probably, but who knows? In a few years' time, they may be knocking your door. We want to do this.
Thank you, Dr. Mayan. Great applause for the discussion. Do you have any follow-up questions or response? Okay, great. So for the sake of the equal opportunity, so we have one question from online attendance. So maybe this is the last question. The question is whether the spacious selections and management in intercropping can improve nutrition in oil palm plantations.
Yeah, thank you. So we did, because I said we are monitoring, we monitored the oil palm watermelon intercrop for 1 year. And then we planted banana on the same fields and also banana on other fields that did not have intercropping before. And we saw that the banana on the fields that had intercropping did better than the banana on the non-intercropping. The reason is that we left the crop residues there. So the melon was taken away, but the residues were staying there. So they add some nutrients. Another reason could be, but we don't know, that it has a better water holding capacity of the soil. But I think in one cycle that would be a bit speculative to think that. Perhaps if you do 3 or more cycles, you get more biomass. That would be the case. But now you saw a nutrient effect. So yes, depending on what, if you choose legume crops, for instance, if you choose legume crops, they can fix nitrogen, and then of course they can add to the soil. If you use banana, you have a lot of biomass. If you keep it there as mulch, yeah, it will help your oil palm. So yeah, it depends on what crop you choose, whether you can have effect or not on the oil palm. But you should not forget, if you have a crop that is growing faster than the oil palm, you have to be sure it doesn't shade your palm, because palms don't like shade. So if you put a tree there that goes very fast, perhaps it's not the right choice. But for instance, in Jambi, they have integrated, they have a test with lines of oil palm and then lines of trees and a line of oil palm again, a line of tree again, and they have jenkel, they have pete, they have all kinds of different, and they follow, they monitor. So that's really important, because it can tell you whether the palm is suffering or benefiting, but it can also tell you whether the other tree is suffering or benefiting. And then now they're looking for market for the products and so on. So, but that's a test case. But yeah, some farmers do it already. You can also choose. There was one from Instieper. They followed farmers that they found farmers that did oil palm coffee intercropping, and they started to investigate: is it a good idea or not? And they just find out how it works. So you can also use farmers as a living lab. They do all kinds of things, and then if you monitor and you find something that works, you can also spread the news. So it's not, because planting yourself perennials is really costly. You cannot just go somewhere and say, okay, I put an experiment in place. That's very costly. So often you have to depend on what's there, monitor it, and then hope that you can find keys on why it works, and then you can tell other people, this works under these conditions. And that's for the crops as well. So if you want the biomass, you want your palm to grow, you need biomass there that helps to enrich the soil, for instance. Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. I hope Gufron can listen to the answers, and I cannot ask him whether he has follow-up questions, but I think that's enough for us today for the discussion sessions. Let's give a great applause again for Dr. Maya. Thank you so much for giving lecture and have a good discussions with us. I think the more we have questions, the more Dr. Maya's explain and her experience, because she has a lot of experience, right? So again, thank you so much, Dr. Maya. With
You're
this,
welcome.
we close our guest lecture. Thank you so much for the audience who come in persons and who come who watch online. Give applause for we all together. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Went really well. Nice.
Maybe we have group photos, but in this setting, I think you can sit on your own chair, and then we can just move over here, and the photographers can stand over there. Can someone help Mas Jalul mungkin bisa minta tolong fotonya?